Greetings, everyone, everywhere, and thank you so very much for being with Women of Concern Professionals and Strategic Conscious Networking as we honor October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This is a major health initiative for WOCPSEN, as we are always on the edge of talking about, discoursing, considering subjects that some might shy away from. We're a nonprofit organization, and our goals and objective is to help the economic sustainability of women globally. We are a partnership of the UN's Global Women's Organization. If you'd like to find out more about what we are doing, including an organization that we have convened, which is called the Global Sustainability Partnership, that we come together on a monthly basis globally and talk about comments and concerns and supporting one another's goals and objectives. This is our first summit of the Lena Baker Domestic Violence and Women's Health Summit. Now, Lena Baker, who was executed in Georgia, March 5th, 1945, was an uneducated Black woman that killed the gentleman that was causing her emotional, physical harm through domestic violence over a period of time. She was the first woman in Georgia ever to be executed. And we're looking at the intersectionalities of race, culture, gender, religion, and class, and how it affects us on multiple levels. On October the 27th, our first conversation was with Sherry Farmer. The title was, "We Hear You, There Is Support." Ms. Farmer is the Field Director, Community of Outreach Coordinator for the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Bureau of Victim Services. On our website and on WOCPSEN TV YouTube page, you can see and hear that conversation. On the 28th, our conversation was Bearing Witness, Impact of Violence on Children of Domestic Violence. Our very own WOCPSEN Board of Trustees was coordinator and mediator and moderator for that conversation. We'll close out our conversations today on Killing Me Softly with His Words, a child of God's response to domestic violence. We have prolific panelists. I'm so excited, and thank you, panelists, for being with me today and with WOCPSEN today as we continue our conversation. I want to tell you why this is important and impactful for me. Today would have been my daughter's 43rd birthday, who died of domestic violence. Her boyfriend shot her in the chest. 26 minutes later, she was dead. Now, there's intersectionalities with that, because when she was shot, they tried to say she was homeless and she had no family. They believed the family and never contacted me. Her friend contacted me 48 hours after her death to tell me that my child was dead and she was in the morgue. So for 48 hours, my child stayed in a morgue without any family at all. Is it devastating? Yes. But I thank God that He's given me the opportunity to talk about it, to challenge and confront. That's the key. I asked for strength that it would not hold me to a point where I could not speak about it, that I would be so depressed that I could not lay upon it. And I've been given the opportunity to do so. And I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful to all of you that are bringing forth your personal comments, concerns, and your emotional attributes. Our first speaker we're excited about, because she's our very own board of Trustees member as well, and has been with me since 2010 when the organization started, Dr. Christine Thorpe. Now, Dr. Thorpe is Dean at the Wise Graduate School. I'm trying to read, excuse me, Nathan Wise Graduate School. She is also a wellness coach and health educator specialist, has been for 15 years in this field. Now, she is the department chair, has been department chair for the Health and Health Services Department at New York City College. She is well versed in her discourse. She and I come together, and this is the wonderful thing I like about this. Just about everybody on this panels have had some personal relationship with me, and I want to share that because that's what it means to me. Dr. Christine, when we started WOCPSCN, our very first gathering a conversation, she was on that call. She saw the vision, and when she was teaching at the City College, she brought me in twice so I can talk to her class about domestic violence. And so she and I are linked in that capacity. I appreciate her. I love her. Thank you, Dr. Christine. The floor is yours.
Ms. Lowe, I thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege to know you and continue to grow with you and build on so many different pillars, particularly focused on domestic violence. I'm grateful to share this platform with each and every person here. I welcome everyone, and I'm sure this is going to be a rich conversation. I found it extremely important to participate in this discussion because during the pandemic, the lockdown kept people in their homes, which led to an increased rate of domestic violence. And having the conversation needs to lead to action within our communities because we are not looking as closely as we could, and we're turning a blind eye in places that we need to look at and do something. We see, in the New York City area, if you see something, say something. And it should not only be what you see on the subways or the buses and trains, but also within your community and people's lives. There are things happening that we never got an idea of because they were locked away in their homes. And little signs and symptoms, situations that kind of make your head tilt a bit and wonder are the things that we need to kind of take a closer look at and recognize that we have a community responsibility to each other. So I want to give a backdrop with some stats and build into some thoughts about ways we can go to address domestic violence across our communities. So around the world, we should know that 1 in 3 women experience violence in their life at least once. And during the pandemic, domestic violence increased between 25 to 35% around the world. And let's note that these numbers are probably underreported, which would probably skew these numbers to the right. So this is what's come forward, but much has still been hidden behind closed doors. Across the United States, domestic violence reports increased by 8.1% according to the National Commission on COVID and Criminal Justice. And in 2020, New York City saw a 10% increase in domestic violence reports compared to the previous year. And that was just those reported, as I mentioned before. And we can, of course, ascertain that many more domestic violence attacks are going on. And this is why this conversation is critical, because we're not seeing all that is happening, and we're not really in tune to see what we need to pay attention to in order to truly help. So, the big question is, what can we do differently or better given this unprecedented time in our history? What can we do going forward? Because we need to learn lessons. We cannot stay in the space of what it was like in 2019, not with domestic violence or any other issue that's impacting our communities. What was interesting to note and what I learned about what's happening around the world, based on information from the United Nations Women in the Headquarters, 52 countries developed a prevention and response system for violence against women and girls in COVID response plans. That's significant. 52 countries that develop a prevention and response plan. That means that it is very well known that women and girls in particular are experiencing levels of abuse and violence in a world that really, many countries, women's voices go unheard and their lives are not valued. 121 countries adopted measures to strengthen services for women survivors of violence during the global crisis. 121 countries. Again, that speaks to a crisis that's happening, targeting particularly women and girls. In the US, I'll speak about what happened in New Jersey. An encrypted text messaging system was utilized since it was difficult to make calls when at home with an abuser. And hotel access was provided for those who needed to get out and stay safe, both from the abuser as well as COVID. So the intersections of the pandemic and being in an abusive situation create a lot of difficult choices and decisions that people have to make and trying to figure out what's the best way to stay safe. The recommendations that I have include building on what systems exist, but it's really important for those of us who are tuned into our communities, have a responsibility to our communities, provide a service to our communities to teach effective problem solving and conflict resolution skills. I think we need to take a couple of steps back. In addition to paying attention to some of the signs and symptoms, but we need to go back and teach people how to address conflict. How do you deal with problems? And in addition to that, I think it's important for us to utilize therapeutic treatment to address deeper mental health issues that trigger abusive behavior. I think there's a lot of unpacking, particularly in the Black community, Black and Brown communities when it comes to mental health. I will say I've made a ton of referrals during this pandemic period for mental health services. I think it's a wonderful thing because it means that there's a cry for help and we need the support. But there's a lot that we need to unpack to get to the root of why such behaviors are happening and being able to get treatment if the situation calls for that. But we need to teach each other, we need to learn how to do better, and we need to hold those who are abusers accountable, because those who are being abused are having a difficult time navigating, and for it to be a global response to address these concerns for women and girls, we need to be doing more on the ground. Thank you. I will turn it back to you, Ms. Lowe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christine. Thank you for those statistics here in the New York area, which is very critical and is astounding what is happening. I know one of my biggest concerns is with COVID, what did they do? How did they handle being in that crisis and can't get out? Devastating, but thank you for that timely and important information. Our next speaker will be Reverend Dr. Damon Powell, and I have to tell you my story about Dr. Powell. I was saying, I go, oh, look, he's all grown up now, he's so cute. I have known him for 20 years, and he was just an associate minister at St. Paul when I was there, and he was just so young and spry. I just thought he was the most adorable thing, and he was on it because we had a ministry called Get In Shoes Hip Hop Ministry, and he was down. He was down. So we praise and we thank God for him. And Dr. Damon Powell has a very interesting relationship to being an artist and a theologian. Now, he currently still resides in Oakland, California, and his interdisciplinary relationship, it explores the intersections between theology and aesthetics and art within the Black American context. He holds multiple degrees, including his master's in divinity from Payne. And I remember when he was going to school at Payne. So we're grateful that he was able to accomplish all that he has. And he is going to give us a presentation. So the floor is all yours, Dr. Damon. Unmute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Thank you, Sister Loretta, for giving me the opportunity to be on this panel, to participate. I want to thank the Women Concerned Professionals for hosting this. I'm glad to be a part, and I'm just going to jump right in. Sister Dr. Thorpe stole some of my stats, so I'm going to try not to read the same thing she did. But I just want to say that here in the U.S. and around the world, those who were already poor, suffering, and disenfranchised were the first to be hit, and they were hit the hardest. We all know that. And it's here that we find our most vulnerable populations at the intersection of race, gender, class, culture, religion, and obviously sex. So it's a well-established fact also that women and children are always the most vulnerable persons in our societies. And under these circumstances, they suffer quite a bit. We're now only beginning to identify and assess the damage that has been done to these people, and it will be years before we really truly know what the extent of that damage was and how much was inflicted. But there are emotional scars that are being left right now as a result of the pandemic. And as we travel further down the road and we look at the fear and the loss that all of us experienced during the shelter-in-place orders, we're beginning to assess the damage and see what's happened. And many studies estimate the number of reported incidents of domestic violence across the globe increased an average of 20 to 30%. In the US, we have several studies that look at key cities indicating an average rise of about 20%. So most of these incidents were reported during the first and second weeks of the shelter-in-place order. So in many instances, the lockdown ensured that the perpetrator was able to remain in the home and continue to enable them to instill fear, violence, create trauma for an extended period. So we've got a lot of issues that are going on that people are suffering from, not only for the perpetrator, but for those who are being abused and afflicted. Many victims were cut off from existing support networks that they already had. They were afraid of their partner and of the coronavirus, so they didn't seek any kind of psychological and or medical attention that they may have needed. So we have a real situation and we have a real crisis that needs to be addressed. I have to point out that this estimate is only based on reported cases, and it does not account for ongoing incidents of abuse within the same family unit. Okay, especially when people are not able to call in. So you may have gotten to call once, but after nothing happens, you're definitely probably not going to be able to call again. And so this meant that many women and children were trapped in their homes with their abusers for extended periods of time, allowing for prolonged periods of psychological, physical abuse, neglect, domination, all the things that go on in this type of scenario. In the Black church, we have continuing legacy of provision, support, and activism for respective communities, particularly our community. I would dare to say that even those who do not regularly attend the church or have forsaken the church altogether still find themselves connected to community-oriented churches and ministries. So it could be through a family member, a person who attends the church, interaction with representatives of the church in the community. So people the Black church has always been visible in the Black community. So at the onset of the pandemic and the shelter-in-place restrictions, this created a deep rift within the more vulnerable sectors of the African-American community. Churches that could not gain access to the needed digital technology and the competencies they needed in order to make the technology work were pretty much just shut down. They were completely left out. Many of these churches will never reopen. If they do, it's going to be at a very limited capacity, but most of them probably went completely insolvent. So we have this other big gap in the community that the Black church was providing that is now no longer there. Since the majority of African-American churches are comprised of women and children, we have a responsibility to address the needs of our constituents, for lack of a better term, and to provide support to these populations. This is paramount. So the number of Black churches that do actively speak out against provide support to those who experience domestic violence was already small. We could really say it's minuscule. And the pandemic just eliminated some of these churches, and it also has now hindered their ability to be effective in these situations. As many of these churches are beginning to open back up, even at limited capacity, they've got so many other things that they're going to be trying to deal with that if we don't speak out and really put this on the burner, it's not going to come up. It's not going to be addressed. It's not going to be dealt with. So those who are in positions of leadership, those who are people who are concerned, we have to really get into the churches and put this on the agenda. And this is a time of rebuilding. It's also a time of opportunity for us to put this out there and push for something to happen. Even if it's just the fact that, hey, let's gather together some resources for community referrals that we can get people to, so we can focus on doing some type of crisis intervention, help people get stabilized, and then shoot them off to referral. There's got to be something that's got to be done. We have to really take an opportunity to look at this. So I implore everyone who's on this call, everyone who's listening, if you are connected to a Black church in any way or have access to an African-American clergy person, please begin to speak about these issues. Please begin to put it on the burner. Let's put it up front as we begin to rebuild and think about how we're going to do church in this new post-pandemic era. Then we need to be talking about domestic violence and make them aware of the damage that could have been done. Part of the problem is we always think in the church that this is something that happens out there, when we know that it's actually happening in here. So we need to change that orientation. And I think that in many instances, the church can be a place of refuge and of reconciliation for both the perpetrator and those who have been abused. But if we have to take sides, then we obviously will take the side of the person who's been abused or neglected. So I really just want to say that we need to look at this. We need to be active about this. We need to not be silent, and we need to make sure that this gets on the agenda. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love that side of the advocacy, which we have missed. Thank you so much, Reverend Damon. Our next speaker will be Reverend Rita Love. And Reverend Rita has taught me how to receive. How to receive. When I was a member at St. Paul, I used to pick her up for church, and we'd go to church together, and she would always want to give me some money for gas. I go, no, I don't want your money. I don't want your money. And she told me one Sunday, she goes, why you don't want me to bless you when God told me to bless you? And that went, doop. I went, whoa, I never thought about it like that. I'm letting my pride go, child, I don't need that. And I'm blocking her blessing because she is being obedient to God to bless me. So I will always be indebted to Reverend Rita about that. She checked me. I like when folks can check me because not too many people can check me, but she did. So we're grateful. We're thankful for Sister Rita Love. And this is someone I haven't heard of about 20 years. But when I made the call out for this, she was one of the first to come through for me. And I'm grateful to you. Dr. Reverend Rita Love. Unmic, and the floor is yours, ma'am.
Oh, well, I want to say thank you to everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. A lot of times I get a lot of invites, but one side of me that people are not aware of, I'm a very shy person. So, and so I really want to thank you for this opportunity. I was really nervous, okay? Because I didn't think when I accepted it, I thought about it, I said, why am I accepting this? I really don't really have much on the subject matter. And I guess my mindset went that way because I'm one of those individuals always in the trenches working. So I'm always working. So I'm working and helping people and taking care of people. I never think about certain things. And so I had an opportunity to think about my first experience, even coming to awareness, is through the military. I was a chaplain in the Navy for 6 years, and we deployed in 2006. And I was in Malta. And one of my jobs as a chaplain is to find community relations projects for military service members. And the first one we had was 2 attorneys in Malta that started a shelter on their own for women that were experiencing domestic violence. And that was in 2006. And Maltese still kind of rates #1 when it comes to domestic violence. Even to this day, they don't. They have the worst history of protecting those who are victims. My thing, I want to share this with you from a military perspective, because as military chaplains, we are trained to take care of the service member. That's who we're trained, and the families. So usually when my first experience with, from a military perspective, I deal with both. I deal with the abuser and the victim. So that's one of the things that my first, let's say, first awareness of it is a couple that I actually married. And the service member, we were at a function and she came to my office. She wanted to talk to me. And she was just sitting there and she was just sharing some of the things that were going on in their relationship. And all of a sudden I saw this stream of blood run down her nose. And then I really looked at her and I saw the bruises. But her husband, also active duty service member, she was going through a lot of physical abuse, and he thought he had killed her because she passed out. He was choking her and he thought she had passed out. So keep in mind, she's in my office and she's sharing. We understand with military that if she shares with the command, then it has to be reported. And she said, well, no, I'll report to his friend who's a corpsman. And I said, yeah, but even if it's his friend, it has to be reported. Well, because what he done, he Baker Act himself. And I'm saying this so you can understand the response here. She was in my office at 2, from 2 to 5. At 5 o'clock, his sister called for her to go to her home to get clothes to take to the hospital. Of course, I was enraged at this point. I was really mad. And so I had an opportunity to talk to the service member. In the military, they don't usually report because they can end their career. And a lot of times the women, most women that are married to service members, a lot of times are immigrants. And so there are cases where the military, depending on what command you're with, the military commander or the military commander may handle it differently. I'm saying this because it goes back to this whole idea of silence. And it is an issue in the military that there is that women and men, there are women and men who are abused, that it is a silence there. So what is the resource? It goes to the church, because a lot of times they come to the chaplain for a resource because the chaplain has confidentiality. But how do we assist an active duty military? And what I look for is resources outside of the military. And it goes back to what we all kind of come to is the church's place, because in most cases, they are people of faith. And so very few churches or very few avenues that I can use, tools that I can use to help the service member maintain that privacy, but also get help as well. So I think coming from out of the military with that awareness is that now that I think of it, since Reverend Loretta Green-Williams invited me here, is to say now, it came to mind is that the church, my church, I'm African Methodist Episcopal minister as well, but the church has a big platform for breast cancer awareness. There was nothing said about domestic violence, no discussion whatsoever. And I think moving forward is that our military is setting up a platform where our military community could have a resource where they can get the assistance that they need as well, and well as in the church, because the church is very silent when it comes to domestic violence. I was sharing with Loretta this morning that with COVID and a lot of our seniors losing their spouses, that some of the widows were pretty much still living, that were being verbally or physically abused by their spouses, and their spouses are deceased, still living in silence because they cannot talk about what they experienced, because in many cases their husbands or their spouses were in leadership in the church. So they can't say, well, I'm glad in a sense that, my husband is deceased, because of what they've experienced. So they still walk in silence and live in silence with that, and the impact that it has on the entire family. So I think being a part of this, I am a community advocate person, I'm a community person, and I can share with you moving forward that in my community, I will advocate for the church to do two things. One is to reach out to our military community. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, so it is a military community, a military town, to start establishing resources and platforms by which military can get the help and the healing that they need, or as a resource, as well as those that are within the walls of our church as well. So that's what I have to contribute there, in just to say that wasn't aware of a lot of what I've dealt with when it comes to this area. So thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Rita. Thank you so very much. The wonderful thing and interesting thing about her topic, and we are going to go into some heavy dialogue when everyone finishes up, because I got some real questions for you. But one of the things that was very interesting for that she and I, when we spoke this morning, how she wasn't even aware that it didn't exist. We're so used to this, it's not a sexy disease or culturally appropriate discourse now. Language has changed so much that something is rooted in the human psychic and being is not even being discourse. So we just overlook it. All right now, don't start me. See, y'all gonna make, all right now. All right, so yes. We have next with us a very different, as a matter of fact, I gotta share this. John is the oldest friend I have on this program. John and I go back to 1996 when we were I was a community board member for the American Cancer Society, when I was a personal trainer and I was just a Miss Thing. Ain't that no, I'm a Mrs. Ma'am now, but then I was a Miss Thing. Amen. And we're just appreciative and so thankful to John for being with us. He is a wonderful individual that has always been close and dear to me. We have always kept in touch, no matter where we've been on the planet. We've been all over the place on the planet. I'm telling you, John travels around the world and the globe more than I do. But one of the wonderful things about John is that he serves as a senior vice president for the DC, Delaware, Maryland. It's called the Delmarva region of the American Cancer Society. He's the director of development for the National Community of Reinvestment Coalition and was elected to Washington, DC, Ward 2 commencement to the DC Democratic State Committee and Chair Ward. We could go on and on about John, because he's got credentials up the yin yang. And when he sent me I'm going, okay, so how long am I supposed to be reading this? But anyway, we thank you so much, John. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Loretta. I'm so honored to be part of the panel, and what an esteemed panel. Each and every one of you. I'm just honored to be in your presence, and I'm learning so much already. I'd like to share my screen. I hope you see it. Did it come through?
1 second.
Loretta?
Will.
Okay.
1 second. We will share. I was hoping 1 second. We will share. Okay, so I have to go to my tech. Louis,
Okay.
did we share that? Louis?
Yeah, I think Loretta, you need to take I think it is Dr. Powell's
Oh,
co-hosting.
out. Okay. All right. So I'm learning something new today, because I'm one of those people that I can run my mouth, but I can't. You're asking me to run my mouth and my hands at the same time. I can't walk and talk. Why y'all act like I can walk and talk and chew gum at the same time? Okay, so 1 minute, John, and we will give you access. Absolutely. So, what am I supposed to do, Louis?
So just go to Mr. Damon Powell and removing the co-hosting access, and then you can pass it on to Mr. Lazar.
Okay, because you're not able to do that?
No, unfortunately not.
Alrighty, not a problem. So what I'm doing, so in the meantime, so what the other thing we want to do is...
Well, if it doesn't come through,
Something.
that's okay. I have my my notes that I can take, so that's okay.
All right, 1 second. We're going to add you now. So now you can be able to go
Okay.
on and add and go. Thank you, John. So thank you for your patience, saints of God, because you know me, I can dance and jump, but chaw. Okay, so John, the floor is yours, and if you do have access to share screen.
Okay, great. I just pulled up the presentation, and if it's not there, that's fine. So thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm going to speak a little bit and share with you what I've learned about LGBTQ intimate partner abuse. And just so we have our terms correctly, it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. And this community of people describes physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, or psychological harm by current or former partners or spouses. And a 2013 Center for Disease Control study revealed higher rates of intimate partner violence among the LGBTQ community. And what is so disturbing is, first of all, and we've already heard this from some speakers, how during COVID-19, there has been an increased risk of intimate partner violence, and it's been higher even for the LGBTQ people. 44% of lesbians, 61% of bisexual women experience rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner, compared to 35% of straight women. And in a 2015 US transgender survey, more than half, 54% of transgender and non-binary respondents experienced intimate partnership violence in their lifetimes. The Centers for Disease Control put out a very specified study called the Youth Risk Behavior Study. And that survey shows that 7% of non-LGBTQ respondents experienced physical dating violence, and 8% reported sexual dating violence. But the Human Rights Campaign, the largest and premier gay organization and foundation, had an analysis that found 18%, almost twice as many LGBTQ respondents reported physical dating violence, and 16% experienced sexual dating violence. So the youth behavior study shows 19% of Black respondents, 20% of Native American respondents, 13% of Asian, and 16% of Latinx respondents have experienced physical dating violence, compared to 6% of non-LGBTQ white youth. So it's substantially larger. Why don't LGBTQ survivors report as many as they should or receive help? Well, first of all, there's discrimination, fears of discrimination, threats from outing to family, friends, employers, and this prevents them from reporting the abuse and also seeking help from social services or programs. And 85% of service providers who work with LGBTQ victims report that the victim has previously been denied services due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. So it's almost like another insult and injury to the survivor. My experience in spiritual counseling, though, has found that many LGBTQ persons maintain low self-esteem, and they feel that they are deserving of the violence. Many feel abandoned by family and society, and as we all know who are in ministry or have been, know they even feel abandoned by God at times. And so they experience emotional paralysis. But I maintain that combined interventions, including spiritual counseling, provide beneficial outcomes. When I was reading Loretta's book, killing me softly with his words. But one passage really stood out to me was when she wrote, I should have been devoting more of my time enhancing my relationship with God. And I had to enter into a place of holiness so that I could hear him speak to me. So all of us who are in spiritual counseling and direction and programs know that it's difficult to tell a person that they should love themselves and that God loves them if they don't believe that God loves them, and they just can't love themselves. And what I've tried to do in over 40 years of spiritual counseling was to help LGBTQ persons possess a unique invitation from God to foster that personal relationship. That is so important. And a truly liberated LGBTQ person of faith will be self-actualized and appreciate one's unique loved place with God and believe that God's plan has a unique gift to them as well as to all of humanity. And in the spiritual counseling, as one of many interventions, I found that the first step in spiritual self-discovery should just address the unique gift of being created gay, to know that God made me gay, bisexual, transgender, and that I'm good in God's sight. And hope is the substance that promotes the internalization of divine acceptance. And it also drives to social activism. And Loretta, you mentioned earlier how important it is for us to address the advocacy part of intimate partner abuse. I found the following scriptural references really helpful. Called to be LGBTQ, looking at Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 4 to 8. Something that I call liberation from the closet, meditating on Isaiah 42, 1 to 3. Outing the truth, looking at Matthew 10, 26 to 27, and chapter 5, 13 to 14. Call to friendship with God from Luke 12, 4, 22 to 24, 27 to 31. And promoting justice, Matthew 4, 2 to 12. Speaking through our hearts, Matthew 10, 17 to 20. There are many references, and they're from the Human Rights Foundation, the Human Rights Campaign, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and from the Intimate Partner Violence and LGBTQ Lives, edited by Janice L. Bristock, and of course, Killing Me Softly with His Words by Loretta, and My Outpouring of the Spirit, Gay and Lesbian Spirituality in the Judeo-Christian Tradition. So I hope that this was helpful, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, John. It was a added contribution. We thank you so much. We just love you. You know, I just love me some John. Me and John go back. We have been on the battlefield of trying to support change. We have been on it for a long time, and I know my feet ain't gonna stop. If I'm in a wheelchair, I'm gonna just roll that chair. I'm gonna keep going, and I thank God for John and his commitment to the communities at large as well. We are excited about our next speaker, Joy. And I gotta tell you a story about Joy. Again, a long time. Joy and I go back when I started WOCPSEN back in 2010. As a matter of fact, Joy was one of the first women, between her and Dr. Christine were two of the first who joined us on LinkedIn and had a curiosity. Well, what am I doing? I know what I was doing. I was just making up stuff. But here we are. So apparently it was good stuff, you know. So I have to go with our late Congressman Wilson when it says, if you're going to get in trouble, get in good trouble. And I'm grateful that I was able to get in good trouble. Now, the wonderful thing about Joy is a composer, lyricist, concert artist, writer, educator, and she is committed to uplifting and empowering and inspiring through the arts and culture studies. She is a cantorial leader and musical director for Florida congregations since the 1990s. She has published 14 books. She has brought the Jewish Heritage Tours to China and Turkey and developed the Heritage Tours through, and I didn't know this, I want to go. Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, Cuba, Alaska. Boy, do I want to go. I mean, as an anthropologist, I'm interested. I'm in, Joy. Thank you so much for being with us, Joy.
Well, thank you. It's Loretta, it's a wonderful pleasure to be with you on this wonderful conference. It's an excellent opportunity to share ideas and really come together. And I want to say right off the bat, it's already been suggested that collaboration is really a possibility from this opportunity. But I'm going to be speaking about the Jewish community, and I would say that any Jewish organization, synagogue, or agency devoted to the well-being of families and women and all who are abused would love, I would think, to collaborate with your communities, because together we can affect so much more powerful change. When Loretta suggested that I participate in this, I, of course, began to notice it all around me. As some of you have mentioned, that maybe it's not something that people notice unless it's directly a part of their own lives or they hear about it. And so when Loretta suggested I participate in this forum, I began to notice it. Last week, the Times of Israel, in October 20th report, noted that a man had been indicted for strangling his 55-year-old wife, Rachel. He staged it as a suicide. This was a grim killing. He attempted to cover it up. He strangled her to death because she said she was leaving and she wanted a divorce. And then he moved her body to the bathtub at their home in Jerusalem. He slit her wrists to make it look like she'd killed herself. He did a little office work on Zoom, and then he called for an ambulance, claiming that he had returned home to find her in the bathtub, dead. And the autopsy, of course, proved strangulation. And he was arrested, and the truth came out. Rachel was a mother of 6. And she worked, ironically enough, for Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. The Times of Israel reported on October 6th that an Israeli man had just been convicted for aggravated murder of striking his 32-year-old wife in the head in their daughter's bedroom and then stabbing her 11 times to death in their home in front of their baby daughter, and continuing to stab her as she fought with the last of her strength to live, and then allowed her to bleed in front of both of them. This woman had served as a social worker with at-risk youth. She was 32 years old. She had met her husband through that work. And the judge remarked, "Our hope is that this ruling will contribute to the fight on violence against women." I would think that Jews are likely to believe that in their community domestic violence is rare, but the fact is domestic violence is deeply pervasive in the Jewish community, even in the Orthodox Jewish community. We as Jews pride ourselves on the teachings of Torah, love, care of family, charity, kind-heartedness, loving kindness, reaching out to others, inviting others to be part of our community, caring for the stranger, appreciation for our women, for their unique role as birthers, mothers, caretakers, the support, the pillar of the Jewish family, the pillar of all children, but abuse to favor any religious or ethnic group over any other. It's found in the Jewish community as it is found in all communities. And among Jews of every spectrum, Reform, that is liberal, or conservative, or Orthodox. And in the Orthodox community in particular, it can be especially difficult to come out and say, I am an abused woman. In fact, it can be difficult in Jewish families, and probably in all religious families, to come out and say, even believe, admit to oneself that one is abused. And how many people have I known, and I have known them, who have remained in an abusive relationship because they kept thinking it would end, and they kept wanting to reach out and make it end, unwilling to see the truth behind the situation, that it must change. This very week, the Jewish Women International launched a new National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence in the Jewish community. It is an organization, JWI, that has for decades been dedicated to anti-violence, to the empowerment of women, and it has worked to address the needs of women survivors and their families. But as it has been mentioned here already, it is not just women who are abused. Men have been abused as well, and in the Jewish community. There are any number of organizations that provide research, education, training. They advocate for political action to address this issue and protect the abused. They work within Jewish communities and the community at large, local, regional, national, international, to address the needs of these individuals, to protect them, to provide them with resources to help them rebuild their lives successfully. And synagogues, organizations, agencies, Jewish communities have increasingly had to admit that this is an increasing issue, particularly during the pandemic and during recent years, notably, of political and social division, which has caused increasing rage and has led to the need for more and more of these resources. As Jews, we are instructed. It is a mitzvah. A mitzvah, you know, a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, son of the commandment. Mitzvah means commandment, but it also means blessing. We are told it is a mitzvah, a commandment, and a blessing to practice tikkun olam, a Hebrew term literally meaning repairing the world, to leave the world healthier and happier and more beautiful than it was before we were born into it. And our only surviving legacy is through the memory of what we did and the lasting effects of what we did in a lifetime we were gifted by God to be brought into. I have gathered a number of resources from online, and I thought I would, and I am able to share some of these with you very quickly, but I made a handout of them, and if you would like it, I'll put my email in the chat, and you are welcome to email me. If you are inspired to contact these organizations or just know more about them or about the Jewish community and its both common and unique challenges on this subject. This is JWI, Jewish Women International. It's new, just created National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence in the Jewish community. Wrong one. Let's go here. This is an example of local agencies. Jewish Family Services is found in virtually every community. This one of Metro West New Jersey, the Rachel or Rachel Coalition, partnering with 8 Northern New Jersey organizations with a variety of services to assist victims of domestic violence and those living in high conflict households. Greater Washington Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse, about assisting survivors of trauma and abuse and providing education in the greater Washington community. I am located in the Tampa Bay area. Many of these organizations provide information locally as well as nationally or specifically in their communities. Shalom Bayit, which means peace in the home. Foster social change, eradicate domestic violence in the Jewish community. Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, gender-based violence, the Jewish position, and a toolkit for action. Shalva, the oldest independent Jewish domestic abuse agency in the entire country, which is an Illinois not-for-profit dedicated to training rabbis, police officers, medical professionals, teachers, mental health professionals, and community groups to see, to notice, and to meet the needs of those survivors of domestic abuse. Fallout from COVID-19 brings more domestic violence, responds the Jewish Women's Collective Fund, which is dedicated to meeting this issue. These are agencies in Israel. Maslan, the Negev, that's the Negev Desert region, Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Center. You'll find all throughout Israel and around the world there are organizations dedicated to this. So I jotted down some of them, and I would be more than happy to email that to you if you would like me to. And I'm putting my email in the chat. And thank you for giving me this time, and also for Loretta and all of you for encouraging me to open my eyes to this. Because it, like many people probably, it's not something directly in my home. And the number of people I personally know who experience this is limited. So I have not acknowledged the widespread nature of it. I know it in the world, but it exists in the Jewish community as it does everywhere. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk. It's been a privilege.
Thank you so very much, Joy. We love you. Thank you very much. And you see, there's one thing about domestic violence. It has nothing to do with race, class, gender, or sex. Everyone is affected by domestic violence. Our next speaker, we're excited. This is a new girlfriend. Yep, I got a new girlfriend, so you're going to be seeing her some more. We're excited about Dr. Mitchell. She is a proud pastor of the St. Matthew's Chapter AME Church in Boonville, Missouri, and is active in both communities. She served as vice president of the Broom Slick Ministerial Alliance. She's been on multiple boards and community contributions. She currently holds the position as administrative secretary to presiding Elder Roger D. Jackson in the Midwest South District, and is a worship leader of the Midwest Conference Women in Ministry. We are excited about our new girlfriend, and I'm gonna tell you now, once I embrace you, you going to work.
Oh, thank you, Miss Loretta. She makes me sound so accomplished, and I'm a baby in the ministry. So, but I have a quick story to tell you. On August 1st, 1968, a couple got married, and they became pregnant on their first night. 6 months down the line, he threw her down the stairs with the intention of killing her and killing the baby. She was 6 months pregnant. 52 years ago, that was me in my mother's stomach. 7 years later, they had 3 children, and she decided to finally leave. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence states that 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year. 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to this violence. I address children because I am a product of and a survivor of intimate partner domestic violence through my parents. And it was always a wonder to me as a child how my mother could stay with someone who was so abusive. Those 7 years saw my mother beat up, broken ribs, blackened eyes, hair pulled out. And every time she left, she still went back to my father. And it is stated that a woman will attempt to leave 7 times before they actually finally leave. Well, on my 7th birthday, my mother decided to get a divorce from my father and stayed divorced from my father. So what does that mean for the children that are growing up in these environments? Well, the long-term effects of this could be physical, mental, and mental health issues. And they have a greater risk of being violent in their relationships. So as I look back over my 52 years of life and wondered how that manifested in me, I'm good, saved, sanctified, and holy, but I wasn't always good, saved, sanctified, and holy, right? I noticed the pattern that as I got older, I became more violent, more outspoken. My relationships did not last long. I had a tendency to pick the same kind of man that my mother had chosen to be our father. I was in and out of trouble a lot. I drank a lot. And I had a hard problem defining my emotions and things of that nature. But I also grew up in an era where you didn't talk about domestic violence. It was what it was. We have a thing in the Black community, you don't let anybody know what's going on in this house. And that was my mother's strictest instructions before we went out to school. So I had to carry all of this violence to my classroom. I couldn't tell anyone. I was hurting and couldn't tell anyone. And now that I am 52 years old, I only got healed maybe 15 years ago by attending therapy and going to work out some stuff in my head about my own place and where I was emotionally and why I did the things that I did. And so I'm grateful for the mental health services I did receive that I sought out on my own. However, as a working paraprofessional now, and I'm working with the Title I school, I am seeing that some of these emotional and mental issues are affecting our children. The pandemic has not been kind to our children, and they're coming to school with all of these issues, with all of these emotions that they cannot process. They're not mature enough to process, and they're looking for a safe space, some space that I wish I had when I was going to school, to know that you're going to school after hearing your parents argue, fuss, fight, or whatever, and come home to the same thing. And it was always a constant cycle of violence in our household. And so what I'm doing today is advocating on the behalf of children that will grow up one day to be 52 years old, to offer them and try to procure more services for them, for their mental health and their well-being. We like to say kids don't know what they're talking about, but we do, and I did, and I know that I had to grow up with this whole emotional baggage over my head before I decided to go get well. Well, I want to advocate on getting them well before they get there. And so that means we have to look at all of the things that come with these children, all the intersectionalities, the race, the poverty, the gender, whatever they are going through, to keep them from getting access to services. Now, my school is lucky. We do have in-house counselors, but they're only there during the school period. How do we get our children out in order to give them the service that they so sorely need? At our church, as the pastor of our church, there's always an open door policy to my office, and we also partner with therapists, child psychologists, and marriage therapists in the next big city over, Columbia, because I tell people I have not gotten my mental health degree yet, so I'm not qualified to do things. And I think sometimes clergy does a disservice when they're not qualified, nor trained, nor certified to address the issues that a lot of people are going through. And so I am fortunate that I have a lot of great friends in Columbia, Missouri that are certified, that are trained, that have degrees, and are well equipped to deal with the issues at hand. So at our church, when I know I can't deal with it, I send them and I refer them to someone else that I know can. And so my message today, short but sweet: clergy, if we are not qualified to do it, don't do it. We can do more damage then we can do good in helping someone through their healing process. I want to thank everybody for this opportunity. Children are my passion. I love them. They are something else, and they'll tell you things, and they are so much more resilient than we give them credit for. But I think if we can get them healed earlier than much later, you know, I was in my 40s when I decided to go get healed. Between age of 7 and 40, I had done a lot of damage to myself, just manifesting the violence that was shown in front of my face as a child. And so I'm looking to try to get these kids a lot younger in order to make sure that they grow up healthy and better, and knowing that they can tell and not have any retribution because of it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Powerful message, and that's real. We got to get the babies because they're hurting and that stuff is inside of them, and they're growing up to be what? Same thing what they saw. This is a really critical conversation, and we're going to go deeper into that as we move forward. Our next speaker, very dear friend of mine, boy, does she have a story. Woo, Jesus, keep me near the cross. Reverend Rosie Freeman, a very dear friend of mine that has done great work in the Richmond Bay area of California, including a founder of one of the churches there in Richmond. She's done work in the prison ministry, helping the transitioning of the incarcerated to have employment, multiple things, but is one that is more critical is her story. Reverend Rosie, could you come on in, please? Praise God. So there she is. We got to ask her to unmute and come on in. So